So, let's talk about health. But maybe not in the way you're used to. We're not talking about a bunch of disconnected tips. We're talking about a powerful, logical system. We're going to break down an approach called HOBA, which really brings an engineering-style clarity to our own biology and lets us influence it with some real precision.
Here's how we're going to walk through it. First, we'll tackle the chaos of health advice and see how to structure it. Then, we'll get into why simple lists just don't cut it. After that, we'll uncover the solid, objective foundation this whole system is built on, see how the logic layer actually works, and finally, really understand its value as a platform you can build on. All right, section 1, from chaos to clarity. Look, we are all drowning in health information, right? There are endless articles, conflicting advice. The real problem isn't a lack of information, it's figuring out how to organize it all into something you can actually do something with. Exactly. Think about it. You might be dealing with some intense sugar cravings, or that classic afternoon brain fog, or maybe you're getting those awful leg cramps at night. Each one feels like a totally separate problem, and a quick search gives you 100 different so-called solutions for each one. It's just chaos. So where do you even begin to make sense of it all? Well, the very first step to get out of that chaos is to just make a direct one-to-one link. You take a specific problem you're feeling and you connect it to one potential actionable solution. It's all about creating a little bit of order, just one simple connection at a time. And this table right here, this is what that first step looks like. It connects a symptom directly to a specific action using a nutraceutical, a supplement derived from food. So for sugar cravings, you've got berberine. For night cramps, magnesium. And notice it's also smart enough to include what you should avoid, like high doses of omega-3 if you're dealing with heavy menstruation. It's clean, it's simple, but as we're about to see, this is really just the beginning. Okay, let's move on to section 2 and see where this goes. Because a simple list is a good start, but let's be real, our bodies are not simple lists. To really be effective, you have to understand the complex web of relationships happening behind these simple connections. A simple list just doesn't work in the long run because our biology isn't some static checklist. It's this incredibly dynamic system. To get real results, you have to start asking why something works, when you should use it, and maybe most importantly, what else it interacts with. Those details aren't just details, they're absolutely critical. And this slide, this shows you that next level. Let's take sugar cravings again. We're moving way beyond just take berberine. We're adding these critical layers of logic. When to take it? 20 minutes before you eat. What are the potential negative interactions? Well, with other glucose-lowering drugs. And what's the actual mechanism? It improves your insulin sensitivity. Now this is a system. So here's the crucial point, the big takeaway. We are moving away from a random list of health hacks, and we're moving into a structured model of cause and effect. Every single action is understood within a much larger context, and that's what makes this knowledge so powerful and repeatable.
This is really the core principle right here. You have to consider the underlying physiology, your personal context, the precise timing of any action you take, and how it might interact with everything else going on. When you layer all these elements together, you get a much more sophisticated and effective approach.
So this all leads to a really important question. Where does all this complex logic even come from? Section 3 is all about the foundation. Because if you want to build a system you can rely on, you have to ground it in something objective, something undeniable.
And that foundation, it's lab data. This is the hard, objective layer. We're talking about numbers, biomarkers from your blood work. These aren't subjective feelings or vague symptoms. They are concrete data points that you just can't argue with or handwave away. And this really is the core of what HOBA does. We take all that raw, sometimes confusing lab data, and we transform it into a coherent, structured system. This turns what looks like a scary sheet of numbers into a clear framework that can be plugged directly into product logic. So how does that connection actually happen? In section 4, we're going to break down the HOBA logic layer itself. This is the magic. This is how the system bridges that gap between hard numbers and the real-world practical actions you can take. It's all built in 3 distinct layers. Step 1, at the bottom, the foundation, that's the objective lab data we just talked about. Step 2 adds context. This is where your symptoms and how you actually feel come in. And then step 3 gives you the levers, the practical actions and the nutraceuticals you can use to intentionally steer the system. And the real key here is that we treat these as 3 separate layers. By separating the objective data from the subjective context, we can build what we call applied engineering-grade logic. It creates this really systematic path from input to outcome without any guesswork or complicated medical jargon. It's just a clear, functional map from your data to your actions. Okay, finally, section 5. Let's talk about why this all matters. What's the real-world value of taking this kind of rigorous, systems-level approach? Well, it's all about creating a foundation that other people can build on. Let's just look at the contrast here. The old way is all about marketing single ingredients or selling these healthy add-ons. It's based on isolated facts. The HOBA way, on the other hand, is about providing a mechanism-driven system, a complete working logic layer that's built on coherent system-level thinking.
And here's the crucial takeaway for anyone trying to build or innovate in this space. This kind of systemic knowledge is incredibly hard to copy. You can't just copy one fact. To compete, you'd have to replicate the entire interconnected system of logic, and that is a fundamentally harder thing to do.
So what does this system become for you? Well, it becomes a solid foundation for building new product scenarios. It acts as this powerful explainability layer so you can actually answer the why for your users. And maybe most importantly, it's the functional bridge that connects that hard data to actions people can take in their daily lives. Now, to be super clear, HOVA isn't some finished, off-the-shelf consumer app. We provide the hardest part, the robust, validated working logic layer. It's the engine that other companies can then use to build their own unique solutions on top of. So, at the end of the day, this is all about transforming raw data into a living, applied, and really powerful system. It's a whole new way of thinking, one that's grounded in data and expressed through clear, actionable logic. That is HOBA.